Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance Podcast. My name is Bree, and I am joined today by someone I have been so excited to chat with. Author Kristine Lynn is here. Kristine, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I am wonderful, Bree. Thank you so much for having me. It's just a bit surreal to be on a podcast that I've been listening to for so long as a guest. So thanks.
Thank you. Well, this is your first time, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a debut romance author with Harlequin. So that's a new fun thing that I get to say as of July 25th. My first romance with them is coming out in the medical line, so that's exciting. But I've done a lot of romance writing with smaller presses before this. And I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, and so I've been leading this very full life that I'm lucky enough to have all of these sort of hats I wear, I guess.
Just in that little bit, I jotted down things that I wanted to talk about, but let's start at the beginning.
Well,
Tell me how you became a romance reader, and then kind of give me where the inspiration for writing came from.
oh my gosh, it's funny that you mentioned it that way, Brie, because I came by romance reading. This is going to sound horrible, but as I became a romance author, so
Okay.
I got my degree in literary fiction, my master's degree in literary fiction, and I was a teacher of English, and I sort of read everything that I was being told to read, I guess, for education purposes and all that jazz. And I didn't read for fun in the way that I do now. I read for fun what I thought I should be doing. So I came by romance reading because I watched nothing but romances. Like I watched rom com after
Mhm.
rom com, um, and thought like I want to start to create these stories. So I started writing them as I started reading them for homework. Like, well, how do I do this well? So I'm not the traditional like stole my mom's Harlequin out of her bag kind of author, which makes this even
Same.
more fun. Oh, you're not? How did you get started? Because I know you
Yeah, no, I
read.
I didn't start reading romance until I was about to turn I was like it was 2 weeks until my 30th birthday, and I was watching Hallmark, and I was like, "Why do you watch these every year and you've never actually read a romance novel?" And the rest is history.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And I'm so glad to know that because I've felt, I read these folks, bios, these other authors that I've come to really appreciate and love. And now I'm like, well, what was I missing? Because I was, yeah, 36, 37 years old by the time I picked up my first real romance, right? Like I read Twilight and I read 50 Shades. But because they were the popular thing to do, right? Not because they were
Mhm.
romances. But now that that's what I read, I'm like, oh man, I've been missing out. I want to redo.
So I have to ask, a nerdy question. So if you read so you've read Twilight, how as a teacher, how would you teach Twilight?
And here's the funny thing. I did teach Twilight this semester, back alleyway. You can't see it, but I'm like talking with my hands because I'm trying to really think through how I approach this with my students. And so I taught a class called Modern Love, and it was the history of the romance novel and love stories. And the first thing we did, of course, was distinguish between what's a romance and what's a love story, because that's the age old Twitter argument, right? Like, is it a
Mhm.
love story like what Nicholas Sparks does, or is it a romance because they end up happily ever after? And then we looked in at the history of it, and of course, we started with Jane Austen and some of the classic romances that, believe it or not, I did grow up on. I just didn't know what they were at the time. Um, and then we got to Twilight, and Brie, it was hilarious talking about that because I had these students writing these fabulous papers on like toxic masculinity in Twilight, and we really dissected it. And we looked at, gosh, we didn't look at the literature and the writing of it. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings about, Stephanie Meyer's writing of it. But we looked at the characterization, what makes it a romance, what are some of the character flaws, and man, we had a field day. It was a good time.
I guess one of the things you can take away from it is those stories capture the juicy goodness of being, like, your first love, especially, like, as a teenager.
Well, and that's what we really, we looked at all of these aspects that we had to for academics, right? Because this is a college honors English class.
Mhm,
Um, but what it came down to was every single person in that room, which was interestingly 90% female, because they got to choose whether or not to take this class, right? So that was
I love it.
a thought experiment for me. Um, but even the gentlemen in the room, everyone had read Twilight, and most of them had read 50 Shades, which of course is the fan fiction of Twilight that came
Mhm.
after. And both of them catapulted these authors into like astronomical success. But Twilight and 50 Shades crossed every boundary, right? Like I only know a handful of people who read Harlequin lines, like the medical or historical or whatever, regularly, but everybody has read Twilight, it feels like. It's bizarre. She did a magical thing with that.
Yeah. Okay, so I've never heard of a degree in literary fiction. So
Mm.
you're not I'm assuming you're not reading like which I think is so cool because I'm like, I've never heard of this before. Usually when I hear people like going to college and pursuing like something in that realm, it's like they're studying classics or were you reading classics or were you reading like contemporary literary fiction?
No, that's actually a great question and distinction between the two. So, my degree is actually in creative writing fiction, but all of the classes, because of that, we had to have sort of a literature background because the hill I will die on is, and my college agreed that you can't be a good writer without being a good reader.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, for sure.
We read a lot of contemporary literature as our literature degree component to the fiction part because what we were writing was contemporary. Um, so we did do some classics. I took a Brit Lit class that was just awesome. We read all these Booker Prize novels, and kind of got to pick them apart and look at the way that history played into it. But a lot of those were contemporary also. So yeah, I feel very lucky because I also went back to grad school later after I'd had my daughter and, you know, quote unquote figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And so yeah, I think it was neat to be able to go back then because I hadn't read a lot of the classics since high school and, I don't want to beat myself, but that was a long time ago.
With your this is so cool. I mean, I love nerdy academic talk, so just humor me for a little.
Please,
So
you're a teacher. This is great.
yes. So when you how did the Modern Love course happen? Did your school come and say, "Hey, Christine, would you like to teach this?" Were you able to like come up with the books to talk about, or how did all that happen? And like, what other romance novels did you and the student? Because I used to love like you would post like you had like a book club with some of the students because they were like really into it, and I was like, "Oh, this is so fun."
Oh,
So how did you come up with all of like the books to read and talk about?
yeah. Oh gosh. So that was the best part. They came to me because I'd been teaching. They weren't my full time job. I taught at the university full time in both the English and the first year seminar departments, and I taught for honors on the side because this is a little unknown fact I don't share with a ton of people. Now I'll just say it out loud for the podcast and the world at large. I failed out of my honors program in
Okay.
college. I didn't go to a community college as I maybe should have because, back then we just sort of, if you were a star high school student, because I love academics, you just go right on to a 4 year university and you don't think twice. But I wasn't prepared for it. And so I didn't do well. And when I went back to teach at the same university, interestingly, um, it was sort of this badge of honor to be able to teach for them at this thing that
Yeah.
I had failed out of. So I was teaching, basic honors English, the 190 or 101 class. And then they came to me and said, "Gosh, we really need someone to fill in for this 290 class. You can build it to be whatever you want." But what they didn't know is I had been secretly building this class for 3 years. Like if they had given me the opportunity. I've got this modern love class because by then I'm indoctrinated into this romance world and I'm seeing it everywhere, like eating, sleeping, breathing. Gosh, there's romance in everything. Like Harry
Yeah.
Potter centered around it largely. Golden Compass, right? There's all of these other books that you wouldn't think centered around it. So I wanted to teach like why is this so important to us? Yeah, so I came up with the books, the syllabus, the assignments, which were so stinking fun. And we read everything. We the book club that you mentioned. The students all wanted to read more Colleen Hoover. Um,
Yes.
so that's what we did because it wasn't on my syllabus. Colleen, I put 4 books on my syllabus, and 2 of them were books about romance writing, critiques on them. And then 2 of
Mhm.
them, we did Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. And then, of course, Pride and Prejudice. And then watched the Keira Knightley movie because it's
Mhm.
college. You get to do
Yeah.
that. Um, but the students,
That classic hand touch scene, oh gosh. You can't unsee it.
you can't. I mean, and he was just so great. And did he go on to do other things? Do you know? Not to put you on the
I
spot.
have no idea,
I
but I will always think of that classic, "Oh my gosh, he touched my hand."
Oh, it's so good, and my students were dying, like, 3/4 of them hadn't seen the movie, only 2 of them had ever read the book before, which I found fascinating. That's a whole different, subject about what are we teaching in high school English classes now, but, no, we had a good time, but then, sorry, so they got to pick the book they wanted to focus on for their final research paper, off a list that I drummed up. So of course I put Twilight and 50 Shades and Colleen Hoover and that way everyone got to pick a different one and we got to cover more that way. But then so many of them wished that they had done Colleen Hoover that we started a book club. So that's how that
Oh,
was
okay.
very sweet. It was student driven.
And one of my Barnes& and Nobles locally is, not very far from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and, like, anytime she has a book, like, there's, like, 2 shelves and a table, and I've asked the bookseller, like, "Why so much?"
Yep.
And he's like, "'Cause we know we're gonna sell them." And, like, I just love seeing all these, like, college-age women, like, storm that store getting her books, and I'm like, "Does she know her demographic?" Like, from your students, like, did you get any takeaways? Like, what was it about her books that they were loving?
So, gosh, this was one of the topics that because the class was set up where we talk for a couple minutes. I'd give them some sort of mini lecture, and on our marketing one, it took the whole day because Colleen Hoover is this magical. She's the unicorn, right? It's right time, right place, and just the right spark at a time when there was like gasoline in the air. And TikTok and Book Talk catapulted this woman with that audience. So I think it's judging off what my students had to say, it's multifaceted. She had a good story to tell that resonated with a lot of folks, and she marketed it to people who were ready to read and hadn't been reading for fun in a long time, which is another interesting phenomenon. I don't know if you see that as a teacher, but like not a lot of folks read for fun anymore, at least when I talk to my college students, right? They're like, nah, we're watching Netflix or video games or so I don't know, it's wild. Her success has been really cool to track.
Yeah, I'm gonna this is gonna be so this will be my first year teaching, and I'll be in 6th grade,
Oh,
and I'm sitting here I just finished this book called Reading in the Wild by Donna Lynn Miller, which I loved, and I've seen a lot of reviews that she has a previous book called The Book Whisperer that people are like, "This one's even better," but it's all about, like, instilling a love of reading in kids,
mm,
and I'm like, I'm just like, I wanna walk in there and be like, "Reading is cool, we should all do it," but I'm like, I know these kids. A lot of kids don't think reading is cool, so I'm really interested in, like, how am I gonna do it? How am I gonna get them to buy buy into what I'm selling? So,
right.
having a class like yours, like, were a lot of them interested in romance, or were they like, how do you think they bought into the class?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think a lot of them were interested in romance, absolutely. I think that has been. maybe an unfailing demographic that hasn't really waned in readership. And if anything, I think the pandemic showed us how much romance reading has just, sort of gone into the stratosphere in terms of sales, book sales, and um, Kindle Unlimited, and all of these ways to access um, went through the roof. They came to me, I think, because they loved romance in general, and the idea of a love story. But asked outside of that, and many of them weren't reading much else, and they picked up that kind of reading in college. So high school and junior high, you're going to be reaching your students at such a cool time, I think, to keep them interested, because I think they tend to drop off in middle school is what I'm hearing.
You kind of asked yourself, like, why is this important? Like, as you were preparing to start the teaching of the class, and
Mhm.
now that you've taught it, like, why do you think it is important for us to have courses that focus specifically on romance?
Ooh, that's the million-dollar question. And what's neat is my students answered it for themselves because, I could stand on my soapbox all day and tell them why this is such a cool world to be a part of, right? And the books are so cool. The stories that they tell are so aspirational. But what's so cool about what happened with these students organically is they came to this massive conclusion that people look down on romance authors all the time, and readers, and it becomes this sort of guilty pleasure that we secretly hide. And I think it was putting it into an academic sense, and looking at ways that romance has been in academia for a long time, because what they saw was there are a lot of academic articles about romance reading and writing and all of that. So they got to pin a different label on it for a minute and pretend it wasn't this taboo subject. And gosh, I really thought about it, Bree. And if I went back for my PhD right now, I would do my dissertation on that subject. Like, uh, why is it romance gets such a bad rap, right? Well, because it's by women and for women, and I don't know, that's how it started anyway. That was the hope, is that it would spur women to read um, independently. But it's so much bigger now. Anyway, I could go on for days. That'll be my look out for my dissertation someday.
That'll be the hill that you die on, and I'll be, like, at the bottom with torches like, "Yes!"
Oh, no, I'm gonna drag as many of us up on that hill as possible.
Yeah, we're gonna storm that hill and just sit on the top of it with you. But I do think, one of the beauties of the TikTok is you
Mhm.
do see, like, all like, just these, like, from young girls to, like, older women, like, I do feel like the culture is shifting a little bit, and I do think that it is just kind of the beauty of the pandemic. I mean, people wanted joyful things, and it's like, here's this genre that's been, like, spreading joy for years that I think people gravitated towards. So it does feel like it's shifting a little bit.
In such a good way, you're right. And it's neat to see, like you mentioned, these different demographics. And I think that's the coolest part about all of this is, even my students were saying, and I see it on Twitter all the time. Yeah, my mom did that, or my grandma did that, and read these books, but they're actually really good. We're like, yeah,
Yeah.
isn't that weird?
I always love the, like, your mom's romance, and I'm like, "Do you know what your mom was reading? You should actually take a peek."
Favorite. That's my favorite. My parents both read 50 Shades, and my, dad will kill me for mentioning this on the air, but it was hilarious because they're both such avid readers, right? And it was the book to pick up. And I remember I'd already read it by the time I saw them, and I was like, oh God. So bad, but so great, right?
So tell me, okay, we have we have your first Harlequin medical coming out, but you did, write books previously. So take me through the journey of, like, your publishing journey. Like, take us through all of it. How did it get started?
Oh gosh, sure. So I actually started publishing under, Kristine Lynn is a pen name, because I really
Mhm.
didn't want my students to find me. So I started publishing under my given name, just literary fiction at first, again because that's what I was told we do. Um, and but I was watching, anytime I was like at the end of a long day or whatever else, I'd be putting on P.S. I Love You, or 10 Things I Hate About You, right? Like these were my go-tos. And then this young woman in my program, in my grad school program, was talking about how she got her whole book published, not just short fiction like we were doing. And we were fascinated, like, oh my God, what'd you do? Like you got your thesis published. You're just the first one of us. And she was like, absolutely not. I write romance on the side. Like, forget my thesis. And she gave us permission. And I say us because then there were three of us who were like, tell me more. How do we do this? This is, I had been thinking of it for a long time. And sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself and go back way further, like 10 years prior. Uh,
Go ahead, go ahead.
this scene from Lethal Weapon 4 totally stuck with me. And this is like the original Lethal Weapons, right? Not like the TV show that's on now. And Mel Gibson is talking to his partner and trying to figure out why Sergeant Murtaugh has all this extra cash, to like spread to his kids and whatever. And they think he's on the take. They think he's a dirty cop. And then finally, in this like firefight scene, it comes out that his wife is a romance author on the side, and she has this pen name, and she's made them this extra discretionary income. And I said 10 years ago, like, and maybe more at this point, that'll be me. I will do that
Yeah.
someday, but I never gave myself permission because there was a taboo around it in my program, in the people I talked to about books and reading. So yeah, then fast forward, this woman in the hallway, I can picture where I was when she said, like, are you kidding? Like, no, I publish romance novels. And I wrote my first one in 4 weeks that winter. So like maybe 2 weeks later, I sat down at my computer and just got this whole thing written. And that book is going to be coming out in a different iteration in September. But yeah, then I didn't stop. And because Bree, I don't know if you've talked to other people exactly about this, but it's the most fun I've ever had. Like I know you write
Really?
too. Do you feel that way? Like I feel like it's joyous to write these stories.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting started, so it's also really hard, but it's so exciting at the same time. It's so exciting.
It is. It's totally both. You're right. I think it's just the most fun because
4 weeks though? Oh
4
my gosh.
weeks, and it was like a 75,000 word book. It was monstrous. Um, but all I needed was the permission. And that's so
Yeah,
awful to say because we really don't, right? And I think especially as women trying to break into the publishing world, it feels like we need that, but we don't. Like I wrote that one for me, and I'll forever be proud of it. It was a story that just needed to be told. But anyway, I after that I couldn't turn off the tap, and I came up with a couple different stories. But I didn't know what to do. Like I actually just met with the editors here, and sorry, I'm in Ireland right now, but I flew over to the UK with my daughter from Ireland just for 2 days so that I could meet the Harlequin and Mills and Boon editors, and they were the nice.
I loved those pictures. I loved seeing your daughter there. I was like, "Oh, that is such a special experience."
Oh, she chatted them up, honestly, more than I did. It was pretty great because she's a little writer, a budding writer as well, and she writes romances and things. But what I was telling them is like I started my publishing journey thinking, oh, I'm a presents author. I'm going to write these like real, billionaire, high aspiration romances. But man,
Oh my gosh.
that's what I
And you're in medical.
but I'm way too dark and twisty for that. Like I write these dark medical romances, that are uplifting, but they have these troubled pasts, and so it took me a long.
But medical feels very similar to presents though. Like medical feels like a cousin of presents. Because usually I think it's some they have a lot of similarities. They have a lot of similarities in my opinion. It's just because the money is there. The
Yep.
money is always there. It's just the profession and the location is different. Like I don't know. I don't know, guys, listeners, you don't come for me, but I personally feel like they're very similar.
Nope. And you know what? I'll be the one at the bottom of this hill supporting you because I do agree with you. I think that's where I found my that bridge. I guess I wanted that aspiration. I love a good millionaire It doesn't have to be billionaire, right? Like I'll settle my expectations a tiny bit. Um, but I love a good, wealthy romance where they get to have a little bit of fun and play with that world. But medical also invites that drama.
Yeah.
Just, it's inherent in the job. And my dad, I grew up, he was a physician, so I grew up with these stories.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay,
Um,
so you thought you were gonna be a presents author. How did you end up in the medical line?
Oh gosh. A couple failed presents, first of all. I kept sending these presents off and they were all very sweet with their feedback like, it's missing this certain part or it's missing this certain part. And I kept having these ideas around these sort of medical settings. The problem is I love reading a good presents. And I loved reading medicals too, but I thought because I loved to read them that that's what I had to write. So I forced the issue, for 3 or 4 books that I then published with a smaller press and called it a day. And then I again remembered that story from the beginning and gave myself permission to sit down and write not what I thought I should be because I read in that vein. Um,
Mhm.
like these are the stories you tell. So yeah, same thing. And I knew it was a right fit because it came out in like 2 seconds. Um,
Wow.
and not that that's the aspiration for authors, right? But for me, that was very telling, because I didn't have to force it. It was,
Yeah.
now, granted, I did like 16 rewrites of the thing, but the idea came pretty quick, which is cool.
It's like, "Hi, Christine, you're supposed to be here. Welcome."
Yes, this like, the sign, like, oh, all right, right over here, medical, we see you.
Yeah.
How about you with all of that? Because is that an area like the medical romances? I know you read sort of across all the lines, but
I do, and every time I read all of them, and every time I read a good one, I'm like, "I wanna write this." I really wanted to submit back during the blitz that medical had, and I
Mhm.
had this whole travel like, I still have, like, this whole travel nurse idea. It's always, like, the heroine and her issues that come to me, and I struggle really with my hero. I'm like, "I don't know about you," but the heroine's just like my girl, she came to me, I could see her and everything. She was getting ready to go to work. I knew what city she was in and how long she was there, and I was like, "But you have to fall in love with somebody." So, like, that's where I struggle. So I'm still chipping away at it, but I did not get it in time for the blitz. So the
Oh,
goal is to like one day actually I just want the experience of being part of one of the blitzes. But yeah, every time like I have a whole small town series in my head that I would love to do for heartwarming. I mean, I love the romance line. So like every time I read one of those, I'm like, I want a pink book with my name on it too. So we'll
oh,
see. We'll see.
my
I aspire to be like the next Maisie Yates with books in like multiple lines or something. We'll see.
that woman, I'm so glad you brought her up because she is like the gold standard in this industry right now. And there are so many of them, right? I follow Terry Wilson,
I
and
love
everything that
Terry.
she's doing. And I've said, like, I want to be Terry someday, but with my books with a little bit more heat, right? Like I want to be spicy Terry.
Yes.
Like, I want that to be but Maisie Yates, man, she's popping out like a book a week. It's amazing. She's prolific.
Tell us about Brought Together by His Baby.
I love this story and it's so horrible because I wrote it, right? But I say it coming back and I guess falling back in love with it. Like this is something nobody tells you about publishing or maybe everybody does and I wasn't listening, that it's not write the book that you want to read, it's write the book that you want to read 342 times because that's and I knew it, but Hannah in medicals and she also is an editor for the Pink books for the romance line, so hopefully, you'll get to work with her someday because she is phenomenal. But she brought out the truth of my story, I guess. So it started as this little seed of an idea. I write a lot of military characters because I was a military spouse for a number of years and volunteered with the military in sort of like a teaching aspect. And some of the classes that I've taught at our university have been for veterans. So I just have a soft spot for them, and they find their way as the heroes in my stories, oftentimes. So I had this idea. It's super corny, but it's like one of those things that just sort of shows up in your head. I don't know if it was like in a dream one night or but I knew that he would be declared missing by the military when he was on an active deployment, and something would have happened to his spouse after she gave birth. So this baby was essentially an orphan, and the woman who took her in would fall in love with this baby, of course, until this guy was found and brought home. And then what happens when these two both, he wants a chance to raise his daughter, but she's fallen in love with this girl. And so they're sort of rivals, but rivals over a child, which is like the worst kind of pawn to have. And so the story was there. It just took some pulling out to figure out, how do we tease these other conflicts in this medical setting? But yeah, I'm in love with it because, there's like a baby with squishy cheeks. Can't beat it.
Writing a medical, you don't like overdo it, but you do give us scenes of them like on the job. So like what did the like research for those moments look like?
Oh, my poor dad. The book is actually half dedicated to him. It's dedicated to Isabel, my daughter, always and forever. And then also to my dad for being that guy on the other end of the phone when I was like, "Hey, this character's in anastolic shock. Is that realistic? Is that?" So between my dad and Google, I've learned a lot about the medical world for sure with research. But I guess the hardest part about medicals for me, and it was easier when I was writing my version of Presents, that's what we'll call them, is all the side characters, right? So there's nurses and there's these support characters that I feel deserve a voice because, the world of medicine and all the people in it are the unsung heroes, especially, gosh, COVID showed us that truly. But there's no room on the page, right? It's like a 50,000 word count. So you really have to distill your thanks for these side characters. So now what I've realized is, oh, that's fine because I'll just write their story next. So it's been a learning curve for sure.
And I remember a while back, I saw that you were working on a continuity, you and Denise and Wheatley. Is that still happening?
Oh my gosh, it is.
I love a medical continuity, especially with medical, y'all don't mess around. We usually get them in the same month, so it's not like you have to wait.
Even better. So I love because you know more about it than I do. It's been very sort of hush hush. We just got like a bare bones timeline. So I know that Denise is submitting her medical that she's working on right now sometime in August. So they said sometime in September we will get the one pager, and that's what's so cool is we're getting the basics of an idea that we then get to tease out in our own ways. And gosh, Denise is a one-click author for me. So I'm so excited she's moved over partially to the medical line because I love her writing. So to get to work with her and make these ideas together while we're both relatively new to the medical world is super exciting. It's gonna be a cool deal. I will keep
I
you
cannot wait. I'm so excited for y'all. I'm so excited. I'm
posted.
so excited you're here. It's great. I want people to read more medicals. I think here in the States, people don't realize it's a thing. I think it's very much like I know I had this assumption that like it was like all the writers of medical were like over in the UK. And it's like, no, now we have you, we have Denise, we have Juliet. She lives in like Ohio. Like a lot of the authors are here in the States, but it's one of those like you don't see it at the store. So I don't think people realize it's a thing. And it's like they're really, really good books. I want people to read more of them.
I totally agree. And I don't know why that is. And you go into, I'm just going to use Walmart as the example. You go into a store like that and there's these heartwarmings and presents, of course, and desires, although sadly we won't see those on shelves as much anymore. But I'm excited about the new line coming out with them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the back side of that conversation is, but the cool part is I'm not shy shy, so I plan to ask
Yeah.
questions once these things start happening in that world for me. Because it'd be cool to know, like, how do we get these in the hands of more readers? Because I love reading them too. Again, these are like one-click authors for me. It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Desire, we read a book a little while ago together from Desire. We read Oh So Mr. Right by the wonderful Nadine Gonzalez, which I believe this is a Texas Cattlemen's Club book. It's part of the wedding series.
It is. And would you believe that it is one of my first known Texas Cattlemen's Club? Then when I started looking it up, because I was lucky enough, I don't know if the copy that you got has The Man She Loves to Hate as well.
Yes.
So I was like, well, now I've got a second book. And now I want to read the whole ding dang thing, but there's so many. This is so cool.
Yeah, I'm very I could probably count on one hand how many Texas Cattlemen's Club books I've read just because I wanna read everything in the series type of person, and so I find it really awkward to just jump in, but I was like, "Well, this is Nadine Gonzalez," so,
Totally.
um yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'll read the back of the book and then I have questions that I wanted to ask you. I mean, we read it a while ago, but shout out to Nadine if you ever listen to this. We love you. So if only falling in love was as easy as falling into his bed. Dot dot dot. Commitment shy photojournalist Sasha Ramos, which I love when we have a commitment phobe heroine,
Right.
is the latest in her family's long history of runaway brides. But when her sister's upcoming wedding triggers her need to flee, risk taking businessman Nicola Williams gives her all the passionate reasons to stay. But falling in love, it will take a Texas sized miracle and one determined bachelor to get this guarded, headstrong beauty to stay. So, two words off of the back cover alone kind of got me was
Mhm.
the commitment shy. Like, I want to know how we get an HEA at the end when this person is afraid of commitment. And then runaway brides. I love a runaway bride in romance as well. So, give me like your overall thoughts, just like based off of the summary. Like, what stood out to you? What was it like? Yes, let's read this book.
So same thing, because you nailed something I think that's like so important for romance readers, are these tropes, right? And I know you said you mentioned that you love, oh gosh, not rivals. What was the trope? Like
Oh,
the
fake dating, because
sneaky.
it turns into fake dating. Yeah.
Yes. So I think what you said earlier about this idea of runaway brides in a romance novel is so counterintuitive to love because we love the HEA, right? And the happy ever after happens at the end of an altar in so many of these books. But what I loved about it is exactly what you said. It was we've got this woman who's the commitment shy person, not the stereotypical, hero who's a little bit commitment shy. And you find out later that it's part of like this curse they believe has happened to their family because it happened to their grandmother and then their mom and now her. And so yeah, the back of the book had me just hooked. And then like page two, I was in. And uh, that's a quick one for me. So no, this was such a good book.
Yeah, I know Nadine, she was one of our, like, very early guests on the podcast way back in the day, and we share a love of Sex and the City, and I feel like anytime I read one of her books, I just get those vibes from her. I just love how, like, fun and sexy and just her books are just so fun, and they just kinda sparkle, but
Yeah,
with the, like, commitment phobe, like, you touch on, like, usually it's the hero. So
right.
when it's a heroine, like, as a writer and a teacher, like, if you were teaching your girls, your students, I mean, because you did have some gentlemen in there as well, does it does the dynamic have to be different? Like, for it to be a heroine, like, I've read, oh gosh, it was a couple of summers ago. It was more like a literary like, I think it was more like a women's fiction novel, and the heroine too was the one that was a commitment phobe, and it was a curse that she believed was on her family as well, and it felt like the reasons have to be different if it's
Yeah.
the heroine versus the hero. What do you think?
Gosh, I'm so glad you hit on that because, that is something that we actually talked about in the class. And we have this conversation in this romance world, just as readers and authors all the time. What is it that makes a commitment phobe heroine not okay when the guy can go through like a string of, and I'm speaking in binary terms here, but we know that the world of romance is opening up to non-binary characters and all of that.
Yes.
But in this hero heroine setup, there is a difference, and we're breaking away, and it's authors like Nadine that are doing it really well, because even though the author thought it was a curse, everyone else in the book told her, like, that's not real. It's not a curse. You're fine. You are who you are, and that's okay. So I loved how she went about it. But it is interesting that we as authors still feel like we have to explain that away. And it's so interesting. I didn't know she was a fan of Sex in the City, because I'm like diehard as well. And they were the first batch of women on TV, and granted it was HBO, so it was like limited TV, to reach out and say like, hey, it's okay to be a, a bit of a player until you find out what you want. You can also never find what you want, and that's okay. It was that, again, that permission granted. But Nadine does a good job with her secondary characters with that. Like the other folks in it are like, you're fine.
Okay, total tangent, but I have to ask about Sex in the City now. So, like, who was your favorite? Or who was your least favorite?
So Samantha was my favorite. Her humor, her
Same.
self-awareness, and interestingly enough, my least favorite, oh gosh, it's not Charlotte, Miranda, because I am Miranda, and so moments of introspection, I always wanted to be a Carrie. I want to be the carefree author who writes and you know, does what she needs to do to take care of herself in this city. She has a lot of fun, but I was totally Miranda. I'm relatively responsible now, right? So I didn't like her character because I'm like, oh, it's like watching me.
Yeah.
But Samantha, she said what she wanted. She did what she wanted. She was aspirational romance for sure. How about you? Where do you land?
That's so interesting how you put it like that, because it wasn't that I disliked Miranda. I did feel like out of all 4 of them, I was probably the most like her. Like, you
Mhm.
get up every day, you go to work. Sometimes you hate it, sometimes you love it, but, like, you're responsible, you do what you gotta do. Like, out of all 4 of them, I really I feel like we got the most work from her, and then maybe, like, I mean, obviously, we saw Carrie writing all the time, but it was just
Mhm.
a different vibe. Um, but yeah, I feel like Samantha made the show, but then I saw this thing on Twitter recently that said Samantha and Charlotte are essentially the same character, and now I can't stop thinking about it. And I'm like, in a lot of ways, it's so right.
That is fascinating to me. Okay, this is gonna be like a night ruiner in a good way, right? Like the thing that like sets you off on a different tangent of what you thought you were gonna do in the evening. Yeah, now I got to give that some thought. Huh.
Yeah,
Mm.
it I'll pull it up because I think I retweeted it. I will find it and I will tag you so that you can read the thread.
This is
It was really good. It was really good.
ah,
But yeah, so I feel like you can see kind of like that but you can just see
mhm.
that Nadine enjoys, consuming things like that in her books. Like it feels very girly, very just like a lot like Terry Wilson, like her last book, Her Man of Honor. I was like, this is her homage to like her love of like Sex in the City. It's so good. I love that people are embracing it. But like the the book does turn into it turns into fake dating, which I
Yep.
love fake dating. What are your thoughts on fake dating?
Oh, I
Or just like fake romance in general?
love it, love it, love it. And we actually just had a conversation at the Harlequin office. So this is super funny because my daughter is very into like K dramas and K-pop and that whole world. Um, and she was talking with two of the other editors who were there about their mutual love of the same thing. And they were pointing out that so many K dramas revolve around that trope. And then I started thinking about everything that I consume, and it's all fake dating. Just I said 10 things I hate about you earlier, but oh gosh, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, right? It's like one of my favorite movies of all time. And I've shifted away from books a little bit, but it's
That's fine.
such a good trope. It's so much there, right? The threat of getting caught, what happens when you catch real feelings? Does the other person have them? It's so good. So
Yeah, I think I'm usually in it for, like I wanna I think what keeps me picking them up, if it's is the fake romance trope, is, like, I wanna know your stakes. What stakes are you giving to these 2 characters? Because I think they are tropes that we see a lot, but I think it's for a reason. It's so fun to see, okay, how's this author gonna do how are they gonna pull this off?
oh, yeah. Well, because I guess that's and I don't know, tell me if you agree or disagree with this statement, that when you're in the world of romance writing, there are the same tropes that come up over and over again, and that it can get a lot of flack in the outside world. There was this wonderful quote about, romance gets judged by the worst of it, and other
Mm,
literature gets judged by the best of it. So,
that sounds
like
so
crime
accurate,
and
yeah.
thriller and things like that. But then we look at these things that have been either overdone or done poorly or really exacerbated. These things that aren't working in writing anymore. Binary characters that do the same thing binary characters should do, etc. But I think what's so interesting about all of that is that the tropes have to get redone. That's what we're working with, and people like Terry Wilson, Nadine Gonzalez, they're doing it well. So you don't even feel like you're reading a typical fake dating until you're done, and you're like, huh, that was really cool. I like what she did
Yeah.
with that. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on The Runaway Bride?
Oh, at like the Julia Roberts movie.
Or, I mean, just it in general, but I mean,
Oh,
yeah, the movie.
oh, I love it. I love
I
the
was like, "Oh, yeah, I have seen that movie." I watched it for the first time at the beginning of this year. I
oh,
have a lot of thoughts on that movie, but
so many
I
thoughts.
love Runaway Brides, I love Jilted at the Altar. I feel like that's always, like, a small I mean, obviously, it's a romance, like, it is I guess that answers my question, but, like, it's such a small kinda portion of the story,
Mhm.
but if it is a buzzword for me. Like, what's your enjoyment or not enjoyment of The Runaway Bride?
No, I love it because it's guaranteed stakes. And it pairs very well with commitment phobe because there is nothing worse, whether you did the leaving or you were left at the altar, than that moment happening and stamping it on you for eternity, right? Like, how do you believe in love after a moment like that? Either something was so bad that it made you leave right at the apex of something big like a marriage, or you got left and cool. Those are guaranteed stakes. So the other character I have instant empathy for, like, ooh, you got your work cut out for you, bud.
Yeah.
Like, this person's not going to come into this easily, right? Like, I'm an insta love girl, right? Like, I want it in my life, not because I think it's the easiest aspect, but because I love love. Um,
You
so
wanna instantly know. You just wanna know instant.
Yes. Oh gosh, my daughter and I talk all the time when we're writing these books, and my 2 critique partners, I've got to give them a shout out. Anna Grace and Katie Frey, they both write for Harlequin as well, and we all got picked up like within a year of being critique partners by different lines. So Anna writes for Heartwarming, and Katie writes for Desire, and is now looking at branching out now that Desire is going away. But we all talk about these built-in stakes, and I'm like, I don't want to have a black moment in my book. I just want them to be
Yeah.
happy. Life is hard enough, especially with these medical characters. I'm like, they're saving lives. Let them be happy. But we're in it for the drama.
I love that Anna's one of your critique partners. I'm reading her first Heartwarming now, well, rereading it. I keep that book on my nightstand. It's so swoon worthy.
Oh my,
Because we're reading Heartwarming this month here on the podcast, and I told my 2 friends, I was like, "One of them's kind of a cheat. I'm going to be rereading it." But yeah, it's so good. She's so good.
oh, she's so good. And it's like a 5-book series. And I read book 1 and I'm like, okay, that's it. Like, where do you go from here? And then every book gets better. And I'm not just saying that because she's my critique partner, but she makes my job easy as her friend and critique partner. I'm like, this whole family, like, I want to know them. And in fact, I've started sliding that family into my other books. Like, their ranch comes up in my ranching story.
Oh my
It's like,
gosh.
she just made it so easy to fall in love with this town. It's like, oh gosh, what's the show that I'm watching now? That's the big series, the ranching one. They're in a small town. Oh, I feel horrible, and I'm on a podcast, but World Virgin River, good gracious, Robin Carr.
Virgin
Uh,
River, yeah.
yeah, and where you just feel like you could move there tomorrow, and I feel that way about Anna's. Like, oh, I would move there to small town Oregon.
Are you working on anything else that you can tell us about?
Gosh, yeah. So I tomorrow am turning in the revisions for my second medical, and this one's going to be really fun. It's like a "You've Got Mail" spin.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm so excited, and I'm trying hard not to gush about my own stuff because that's really tacky. But
You
this
should totally gush about your own stuff.
oh, good. If not here, where, right? But no, it was such a fun story to write, and it's actually pretty fun to revise because again, Hannah is helping me bring out these internal conflicts of this, boss CMO woman who can't really make friends in her industry without it sort of undermining her professionalism. So she's found this guy online that she loves to talk to about her horrible new surgeon that she has to work with, and they're the same people, which is just so fun. So
Oh,
they're
I love it.
best friends online and kind of falling for each other, but in real life they're rivals until they're not, of course. So that's going to be coming out. It's my second, and it's in the same series, this Mercy Hospital series. And yeah, and then I'm writing this 3-book series for Thule that's all ranching and high stakes in the ranching world and fires and stuff like that. So I just turned in edits for book 2. So yeah, this world is very like nothing happened, and then everything exploded. And yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, that sounds so fun. I love a good Thule small town romance. They're so good.
Oh, they're so good. And those, just like Harlequin, those folks are so great to work with. They're just top of the game professional. It's really
You
fun.
are a busy woman, okay? You are busy.
Anna and I say that all the time. Like, these are good problems to have, right? Like, we
They
want
are.
problems we hoped for to be this busy and no, and to get to talk to you and this world is so uplifting. Like I've said that so often, like romance readers and authors are some of the best people I've ever met in my life. Which is why I would never consider doing anything else, right? Like we lift each other up and yeah, so thank you for having me today. This has just been
This has been great. Well, I wanna ask you some fun, like, round out questions. Are you ready? Just first thing that comes to mind, don't think too deep into it.
you got it.
Okay, first and foremost, like, you shared with us earlier, you've been hanging out in Ireland. Tell us, like, a magical Ireland moment, whether it's, like, you tried a restaurant or you saw something beautiful, you hit up a museum, a magical Ireland moment.
Okay. Well, my daughter and I just got to see, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Once. It got made into like a Broadway play after the movie became popular, but the actors in it were in this concert because he's from Dublin and it was my bucket list to see him. And I don't know if you've ever seen those old movies or TV shows where they show people walking into like an Ireland pub and people just pick up instruments and start singing. And it was
Oh my
like
god.
that, like such an intimate little venue and um, playing the guitar. There was a violinist. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And speaking in this thick Irish brogue, which will find its way into a book someday because I'm sorry, there's not much that's in my humble opinion. Um, so yeah, we had this magical moment together of getting to listen to this great music. Yeah, it was great.
Well, as a mom, we both have teen daughters. Mine she'll be
Mhm.
15 in November.
Mine
How has oh, yours is gonna be 15 too?
totally in November.
Oh my gosh. So, having a teen daughter, what has this experience, I guess, taught you about, like, your younger self and, like, the woman that you've become, if that makes any sense? Like, reliving your girlhood, I guess, in a way.
Mhm. Um, so this time traveling with her, like we're over here for most of the summer, it's sort of like a reset button for both of us. It reminds me very, very much of what it meant to be a teen and to be able to go to my mom because my mom and I are very close. Um, and be able to talk to her. And so my hope was to create this moment for the two of us, that, she's always come to me for things, but I'm so busy and I'm a single parent. Um, right now. So this, being able to put aside, I'm still writing, of course, because I have to, but to put aside everything else has reset my priorities, right? I think it's very easy when you're in the muck of it to just go, go, go. And to take the time where you can, as opposed to, I'm going to make this time for both of us. So we have laughed harder than I've laughed in a really long time. And she actually said something. She said, either I've gotten funnier or you've gotten more delirious because you're laughing at all my jokes. And I was like,
Oh.
you've always been funny, but no, now I'm chill enough that I can listen to the whole story or the whole anime recap or the whole, because I put everything else aside. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's been great because it's brought
I
back
think
my
that's
teen
great.
years and hopefully what I want hers to look at and look like.
Yeah. I just love those moments when I, like, stand back and I'm like, "You're, like, obsessed with things like teen girls have been for
Totally.
hundreds and hundreds of years." Like, Harry Styles is all over your wall, and you you're looking at me crazy because I know the words to Christine Aguilera, and I have to explain to you that, like, she was my, like, she's
For
from
sure.
my generation.
Yes.
It's just it's so fun. I think it's just I don't know. I have a thing of like teen girls are just so great. So having like you on as another mom of one, I'm like, how's it going for you?
Oh, it's so funny. I think of that meme and it's horrible because she actually, I don't know if your daughter does this, but she speaks in memes. And so I've learned to also speak in memes. Um, where it's like something about like, please don't tell me about that anime show or something like that. But it's like these obsessions. I'm like, oh yeah, I had them too. Like In Sync was everywhere in my room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. And
I
it's
think it's like that reminder, like, even the older we get, it's like, it's okay to still be obsessed with things. I think that's like the biggest takeaway from I've had so far is like, yeah, once upon a time I had no problem obsessing over things, but you get so busy in life, like you said, like
yep.
you don't pay attention to the joke. You're so worried about, I got to do dinner, I have to pay bills. And it's like, take time to be obsessed with things.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great way to put it because there's nothing wrong with being obsessed. And then now I can also completely empathize with my own mother, where I'm like, oh, you didn't care.
Yeah.
Like in that same way, right? You weren't as obsessed as I was with NSYNC
Yeah.
and everything else. But she went to a concert with me because it was, important to me at the time. And no, it's a great way to put it. I'm going to be obsessed more.
Yeah, we should be obsessed. Okay, you've talked a lot about rom-coms, and I love rom-coms too.
Yeah.
You'll have to come back and we'll have to like talk about a rom-com or feel like, but like this may be hard for you since you love them. What's your favorite?
Oh, good grief. I'm obsessed with rewatching a few. So I don't know
Okay.
if I could pick a favorite. But I'll give you my favorite right now because of where we're at. And it's one of the few that I rewatch all the time. And it's P.S. I Love You. In fact, I made my daughter in the pouring rain. We had like a yellow rain and wind warning in Ireland, which is like how they do it. Um, and I didn't care. We were going to, on the way home from our trip, drive through this national park that she was in, that Hilary Swank drove, where she met Gerard Butler. And it's going to be so great. And we're going to hike in the Moorish area. Like, it's just going to be beautiful. And it poured sideways, like sideways rain. And I still
Oh
made
my
us
god.
go and we didn't hike, but I got out and I took pictures because that story has meant so much. Like it's a rom-com, of course, it's hilarious and Lisa Kudrow is amazing as a supporting character, but it's like love and loss and
Okay.
overcoming loss and falling in love again and opening yourself up to that. So speaking of tropes, like second chance romances or chef's kiss as well. Yeah,
Love that.
I'd say that's one of my go-tos. How about you? Do you have
P.S. I
one?
love you. You know what? My favorite, I'm starting to realize wasn't actually a rom-com, I guess. According to some people, I love Sleepless in Seattle, which I know is a lot of people's like least favorite Nora Ephron's, and I get it. But I love that movie.
Hands down. It's one of my repeats. And
Yeah.
so is You've Got Mail, obviously. But um, no, I can't. I don't know. It's up there as one of the tops, and it has to be rom com. I mean, oh gosh, I'm gonna blank on her name right now, but this her best friend, Meg Ryan's best friend in it.
Rosie O'Donnell, she's great.
Oh my God, she carries it, and his wife is in it. Oh, they do everything right. It's so good.
Yeah, it's such a good movie. Okay, tell me the last song that got stuck in your head.
Oh my gosh. So it's called All for You. And it's the singer's name is Kian DeCrow. So the coolest part for me about traveling with this teen daughter, and one of the coolest things anyway, is that we've been listening to the radio, and she's such a music oriented person. That we're learning, we're here for 7 weeks. We're learning the songs. So when we went to this concert, we went to see Dermot Kennedy together. That was like her thing, right? Her bucket list thing. And the opening act was a guy that we've heard on the radio the whole time we've been here. And so I kid you not, Brie, I have been singing that song, and it's so sweet. It's so sad though. It's like a breakup song, but it's oh so good. So
Those are some of the best, yeah.
yeah, it's just lovely, and it catches in your head. I should have done it all for you. Love
Well, that's the last song that got stuck in your head. Tell me one of the songs that would be on the soundtrack to your life.
that. Oh my gosh. Fast Car, Tracy Chapman.
Oh, oh, I haven't heard Tracy Chapman in so long. Okay,
Oh,
that's a good
she's
one.
worth revisiting, and it's so neat, like, I don't know, this is like a tangent, but that would for sure be on the soundtrack of my life, but, um, like, all of these older '80s singers that we knew, or maybe even before our time, are making this resurgence because of, pop culture today, and Tracy Chapman just recently, like, spoke out about, oh gosh, what's his face? Luke Combs, I think, just did a remake of it, which is
Oh
good.
my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really good. But because of that, she's seeing this resurgence, and gosh, she's worth re-listening to some of her stuff. She's so good.
Okay, so tell me one of your most read authors.
Ooh, Jodi Picoult, going back.
Oh, you're a Jodie fan.
I am. Yeah, I really am.
I haven't read much by her, but what I have, it's been really good. I
Oh,
like it over here with the Jodie fans.
Oh, totally. Drama central, and really relatable human conflict. And I think that's like where my dark and twisty writing comes from that's transferred over to romance. But yeah, I don't know, Terry Wilson for sure. Um, in terms of romance, like I will read anything Terry writes in
She's so
any
good.
publishing form. She's so good. And she does it seamlessly. Like she has a distinct Terry voice.
She does, she does. I just love how girly Terry is, and I've told her, like, "I just love how unapologetically girly you are."
Yes, yes. Not only unapologetically, I've always I wanted to be, Maisie Yates as well. I think that was such a great thing that you said earlier. To be the next Maisie Yates would be huge because I think I'm a lot like Maisie Yates, like in
Mhm.
terms of my day to day life and very busy and I want this career to be successful. Um, but secretly, I would love to be Terry. I just could never pull that off. Like she not only is unapologetically, but she is so perfectly herself. Like no
Yeah,
one could replicate
yeah.
Terry. She's pretty great.
Well, tell me one book that you wish you could have the experience of rereading again for the first time.
Oh, oh my gosh. So there one of my favorite romances of all time is a British author, Jeanette Winterson. Um, and she won the Booker Prize with one of her other books, but someone turned me on to, like 15 years ago, this book called Written on the Body. And my copy of it, because I reread it every year, is like taped together, like sticky taped. And that's the only
I
thing.
love a taped together book. I love it.
Oh, it's so good, and every time I read it, I find something new to appreciate, b and also because I'm growing as a person, and so I find a new item to love, but to reread it again for the first time now at 42 years old would be like I don't know, I think it would be incredible because it's a genderless narrator in first person, So you don't know, you know, and you get to make up your own, I guess, idea. Because at one point, the narrator was dating a man and is now in love with this married woman, which sounds very taboo and horrible. Till you read it and realize they're perfect together. It's
Oh my
so
gosh.
great, and it's lyrical and magical and everything that a romance should be. Like the pining just comes off the page. Oh, yeah, I could rave. How about you? Do you have a book you would reread you would wanna reread for the first time?
Oh, I think it would be, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, just
Mm.
because I mean, for the book is fantastic, but I think that is the book that I have the most nostalgia with, like,
Oh,
I read it in 8th grade English class, and I at the time, I went to a Catholic school, and so they separated us, boys went to one class, girls went to one class, and I can still see little Miss Turner in her little suit
oh,
outfit. She smelled like cigarettes, and her voice was like that deep, like Lucille Ball later in life type voice, and she loved that book. And
oh.
years later, like we're all late 30s now, me and so many of my girlfriends that I have kept in touch with still reread that book. And
Ah,
it's like, I don't know, it feels like a connection thing. It's like we
yeah.
haven't seen each other probably since 8th grade for a lot of us, but like that is the connection that we still have. Like we'll all admit, like, oh yeah, I reread this book, or like some of them have reread everything by her at this point. And it's like at the time it was no big deal, right? It was like required reading, but here we are years later, we all still rave about that book. So I don't
Oh,
know if I could like go back to time and place, maybe it would be that.
oh, but I love that, and you just hammered home the what reading does, right? Like, it's still after all these years connecting you and these people that you haven't seen and
Yeah.
connecting you to your memories. It's so cool. Mhm.
Well, can you tell everybody where we can be keeping up with you online? You have a newsletter.
Oh.
Please plug your newsletter.
Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world to go on your dream podcast and not have your newsletter ready yet. But I promise it's for a good reason. It's because I've been writing all of these books and Kate and Anna keep
Yes.
saying, "Write your darn newsletter." And I'm like, "I will. As soon as I turn in these revisions that are due Monday." Or I will as soon as I, fill in the blank. So I don't have a newsletter yet, but you can keep in touch with me at Kristine Lynn Author, that's with a K, at Gmail. And then I also am on Twitter as Kristine L. Author. So please reach out. I would love to hear from all of you, especially if there's anyone who would like an advance copy of these books that are coming out. But thank you so much for connecting me with readers and with you. This is truly a dream. I can't even tell you.